Hi there, my name's Ben and I like to read. Today we're going to be finishing off our little mini-series of dystopian, totalitarian, and dissident literature, and we are going to be focusing on perhaps the archetypal dystopian novel George Orwell's 1984. Now, in my previous video on Animal Farm, we covered a little bit about George Orwell's life, so I won't go into the background on the author himself. Feel free to check out my previous video on Animal Farm for a little bit of that background. Instead, we're going to hop straight into the plot synopsis and the analysis of the book. So, 1984 is set, of course, in, you guessed it, 1984, in what was formerly the United Kingdom, which has now been renamed Airstrip 1. The world is in a state of constant war. We have three supernations. We have Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia, who are consistently vying for total world domination. Airstrip 1, which was formerly the UK, is now within Oceania, and in it, the city of London is but a pale imitation of its former self. Living in London, of course, is our main protagonist, which is Winston Smith. He is a government bureaucrat who works for the party. Now, the party is the overarching political power structure within Oceania. They are this totalitarian, shady, obsessively, they're obsessed with power, power hungry, any sort of descriptor that you want to put to them. In essence, they are the biggest of the baddies. However, they're led by Big Brother, who is this almost messianic and almost godlike figure that watches over everybody. And of course, it is now entered into the popular lexicon. Big Brother is watching you, so it comes from this book. Now, Winston Smith, of course, as I mentioned, low-level government employee, low-level party member. He's part of the outer party, which means that he has access to certain privileges, but not a whole lot. In any event, he notices that, of course, we're being watched by everything, so outwardly he portrays this image of, he's going along with the flow, he's doing his work where he redacts and updates, changes historical facts in order to fit within the party's ideology. But in secret, he's hidden a novel where he writes out all of his deepest and darkest thoughts. In essence, he's committing what the thought police, which is the secret police of Oceania, call thought crime, which is the crime of even thinking evil against the party. Now, along the way, he meets this girl, Julia, who he hates at first for some reason, but then eventually they fall in love. He realizes that she is also a dissident like him, and they engage in sexual trysts, across the English countryside, and they decide, okay, well, now we have to do something to take down Big Brother and the party, because this can't go on. We have to activate the proletariat, the 85% of the population that are not members of the party, that are essentially no better than slaves. They're approached by a man called O'Brien, who is a member of the inner party, so he's a part of the elite. And they believe, okay, yes, he's part of this shadowy resistance that is going to help us take down Big Brother. Unfortunately, O'Brien is, in fact, a high-ranking member of the Thought Police, kidnaps them both, and tortures them. And while he's torturing them, he brings them to room 101, which is feared throughout Oceania as the place where your deepest and darkest fears are used to torture you into submitting to Big Brother and to submit to the will of the party. Now, this book was written shortly before George Orwell passed away. It was highly, highly influential. It's taught, again, in many schools, much like Animal Farm, almost forced to be taught, which, again, as I mentioned in my previous video, is a little bit ironic considering the fact that, you shouldn't be compelled to do anything. You shouldn't be compelled to read anything. You shouldn't be compelled to think a certain way, which is the whole point of this book. And I mean, it's very well written. It's without getting too into the pontification of how important it is and how terrible totalitarianism is, and how having one party is destruction of democracy, and having all central power, which changes the minutiae like language, because language influences thought. In order to conform with their ideals. I mean, it's scary, to say the least. I mean, you read this book and you're almost like, oh my god, this is a horror show. I mean, the book itself is, a couple 300 pages, and honestly, it can get a little bit dense, but Orwell is such a compelling writer in the sense where he knows how to weave a story. He knows how to weave his philosophy in there effortlessly. And it does remind me a lot of We by Evgeny Zemyadin, in the sense that there is that seamless linkage, that marriage, if you will, between thought and language, and that philosophy, and of course how language can come to define your thought. You can't think a certain way if you don't have the correct words to express yourself, and that relationship is very, very well explored here. You can see it, in fact, in in the old totalitarian regimes of the 20th century, where they would deliberately change certain aspects of official speeches, where they would redact historical facts, even some scientific facts as well, in order to fit their ideology, because, as O'Brien describes it, they're not necessarily bent on world domination or dominating people. They crave power, and power in all of its forms. And as O'Brien says, if you imagine a boot trampling on a human face forever, and if that doesn't shake you to your core, I'm not quite sure what will. This book, I have to say, I loved it. I read it relatively late I read it when I was in university, so I wasn't forced to read it in high school, as so many people are here. That said, it left a profound impact. I have to say that it is an important book. It is a book that cannot be skipped out on. You should read it. Everyone should read it if you have the opportunity. Even if you've read it before, if you were forced to read it again of your own volition, and try to draw some parallels within history where stuff like this has happened. There are some people who try to draw parallels with this book and what's happening in the present day. And I mean, again, this isn't a political channel, so that's neither here nor there. People are going to make their own assumptions one way or the other. That said, the most interesting aspect of this book is that point where there is such a marriage between language and thought, and the fact that you can be persecuted just for even thinking a certain way remains a highly, highly controversial and, of course, intellectual topic. I mean, you could extrapolate it to so many things, which again we won't necessarily get into, but we could at a later date if you guys want me to talk about it. Read it. That's the last thing that I'm going to say about this book is just read it. It is a fantastic read. Not just for its philosophical and for its political merits, but just for the beauty of its language, for its artistic merit. It stands head and shoulders above most other books, not even in its genre. So if you've read it, let me know in the comments what you think about it. If you haven't read it yet, give it a read and let me know. Aside from that, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.